sorry, I need to go back. I'm learning this technology. A useful term in French is avoir l'embarras du choix, to have the embarrassment of choice, which means to be spoilt for choice. What books to include and what to leave out. When Rick first asked me to do this, I was so excited at the prospect that I stayed in my pyjamas all day, from 5 in the morning till 10 at night, brainstorming and thinking everything, all the books I wanted to include. My friend Tom Bristow in Townsville said he wanted me to do a series of talks and podcasts on all these books to be called the Pyjama Papers. The overall shape now is the development I discern from childhood reading to adult reading, the connections between these stages, how they relate to my interests and what I've undertaken in my life, and the people, friends, family, teachers, colleagues, all instrumental in shaping these reading choices. I think you might like this. Unfortunately, our 7 grandchildren are all a long way away and can't help with the technology, so I'll do my best. At the end of this talk, I will dive in and attempt to sum up the multiplicity of roles reading, writing, has in our lives. Very interesting stuff. I don't know if you heard yesterday on Classic FM, Daniel Defoe in 1703 was put in the stocks on the 31st of July, but for having written a very dangerous political pamphlet. But all the people around him didn't throw rotten tomatoes, they threw flowers at him. I thought that was lovely. Lest the books I mentioned seem too esoteric, as in the case of some French texts, I've included translations here. Reading has always been important in my life. Walking across Possum Park, as we called it in Claremont, WA, the municipal park, from my school in WA, which was Claremont Primary, to the library, and reading the whole collection, I think, about 12 books a week, including the forbidden adult stuff. Our daughter was very, sorry, I'm going the wrong way, was very aware that, I'm going to do it there, that I was always lending books because I was so excited about them and wanting to share them, as lots of you in the room do as well. And forgetting to whom I'd lent them. So she made me these ex libris stickers quite a long time ago, which are wonderful. Books in the Claremont Library were supplemented by books on the family bookshelves, as well as grown-up books, which were very seductive. The Rains Came by Louis Bromfield, which I think I probably read about 9, and it's got wonderful seduction scenes in it. I was fascinated by books on birds and on antiquity. Birds occupied me from a very early age and continue to do so both in my reading and in many of the writers I enjoy. What Bird Is That? And later Simpson and Day. And one of my very great WAG friends sent me this, when I can press the button, was a reference to Olive and Dunn. All those, now with over 100 poorly focused colour plates of things that are, I don't know, probably some kind of thornbill, maybe. So this is a very dear friend who, my dear friend Umbesu knows well. I grew up knowing lots of bird calls, I think partly because I was very short-sighted, so I was good at ear things, and being able to reproduce them from a very early age. We lived opposite Kings Park in Perth, in a rented house. The pallid cuckoo, I can't have got enough where to whistle, which has got the ascending notes. I can't do them, not quite. And the pardalotes that are always telling us to be quick. They're very tiny, hard to see. St Fred of Perth, as I often call my father, was brilliant on birds and indeed on all Australian fauna and flora. Books on antiquity on the family bookshelves I also found fascinating. I've got the right one, that's right. This Legends of Greece and Rome, which were all about these wonderful gods and goddesses and so on. I recall being very small and reading the Ode to the Bandusian Spring on Horace's property. Later, I discovered a charming book, Poets in a Landscape, which has a chapter on Horace and the Spring by Gilbert Hyatt, a Scot and a legendary lecturer at Columbia in the United States of America. Hyatt, this is gorgeous, travelled around Italy with his wife in the 1950s in their Morris Minor, which would have GB on the back and so on probably, and their brownie box camera, and visited all the places associated with the poets he chose to look at. And he included translations of their poems. So Horace, they're all in, there's about six or seven of them. The first area of research in publication, I went on to, have I got the right one? Yes, reigniting my passion for antiquity, the French Renaissance, with this wonderful friend, Beverly Ormerod, as she was then. A rich offering of all the literary and cultural aspects of the whole century. It was really the best course I have ever done in my life. It was just wonderful. We looked at this picture, quite a lot of you will know, La Dame à la Licorne, the lady with the unicorn. Some of you will have seen that. And now sent to the little grandchildren, there's 7 of them in the Eastern States, because unicorns are so popular with little girls, and I thought, good idea if they had some of the real unicorn. This was done as wedding gifts. There's about 6 or 7 tapestries kept out of the light now in the Cluny in Paris. So I wrote a master's preliminary and a master's thesis, both in French, supervised by Bev, as well as my first academic article, very exciting, published in the UK on a collection of love poetry from 1544. This one, very battered cover, as you see, because it's had a lot of use. The Delhi, which is, there's also a clearer one there, 449 10-liners, dizaines, are the majority on the complex feelings as engendered by love. Put that down. The poet, I'll show you in a second, Maurice Sèvres. We think he was born about 1501 and died in 1564, so quite a good innings for someone at the time. The only person that really lived a very long time was a very beautiful mistress of one of the kings, who was a bit like Elle Macpherson, very clever businesswoman, 20 years older than one of the lovers she had, and she lived a very long time in the 16th century. The name Delhi hides the identity of the beloved, a fellow Lyon poet, a woman called Pernette du Guillet, who married another man, not Maurice Sèvres, and died in childbirth, as so often happened. Delhi is a reference to the goddess Diana, born on the island of Delos. This is the link by Sèvres, a brilliant Latinist and Hellenist, to the tradition mentioned by Gilbert Hyatt that I've just told you about, Poets in a Landscape, practiced by the writers that I call the sexy Latin poets, who play on the resonances of the woman's name. They're terrific, the Gilbert Hyatt ones that are mentioned. Like the goddess Diana, the huntress, daily wounds and heals and is a source of light and darkness. Stars, moon, darkness, it's just resonates through the whole collection. She's also an object, as I'll show you, of higher virtue, an objet de plus haute vertu, which is they're following the Neoplatonic, Platonic thing of the woman is going to guide you up to greater things. A few lines will serve to show the qualities of Sèvres' verse, which set him apart from all other poets of the 16th century, in my opinion, and in the opinion of I.D. Macfarlane, who did that collection. Shades of the 16th century English poet John Donne, I have done, but I have not, that thou hast done, but thou hast not done, he says to God, with a skillful blending of abstract and concrete in a poem woven around spring. So when his beloved's not there, he says, mon espoir est dénué de son herbe, my hope is denuded of grass, because he's done all this lovely picture of buds and spring, but when she goes away, and when she comes back, mon âme se frise en son avril superbe. So his whole year kind of curls up, often used for hair, frisé, into a superb April when she's around. Or this beautiful poem, which shows a rare moment of an embrace. It's very clever. These are the last 4 lines of it. Car en mon corps, mon âme, tu revins, sentant ses mains, mains célestement blanches, avec le bras mortellement divin. I'll translate for you in a minute. L'un couronné mon col, l'autre mes hanches. So, into my body, my soul, you returned, feeling these hands, her hands, celestially, yeah, English, white hands with their mortally divine arms, one crowning my neck and the other my haunches. So it's an embrace. It's very clever. Right. Resonant imagery resounds throughout the whole collection, here illuminating a poem which begins as I.D. Macfarlane says, that yesterday of thy sweet presence was a cloudless day in the middle of darkest winter, and proves that the night of thy absence, night of absence, is a time more overcast to the mind's eye than that is to the body, this grievous existence of mine, which now, because of thy absence, denies itself entirely to me. So he's always on about her being there or not being there, and so on. The last 4 lines draw on a reference to Exodus, as our wonderful editor tells us, I.D. Macfarlane, and to the 9th Egyptian plague. So people reading at the time would have been totally familiar with all this. We have to go back and look at it. And he says, dès le point que parti tu fus, comme le lièvre accroupillant son gîte, notice the spelling, je tends l'oreille, voyant un bruit confus. Tout est perdu aux ténèbres d'Égypte, or as they would have said, d'Égypte. They didn't say the P in the 16th century. So for the moment you left, like the hare crouching in its burrow, I try to hear with my, I stretch my ear, hearing a confused sound, completely lost in the darkness of Egypt. So it's very, very clever. Okay, so in 2008, this festive volume in honour of a great friend of ours, Chris Wortham in Perth, now Emeritus Prof, Renaissance Poetry and Drama in Context, so it was sort of celebrating his retirement. It gave me the chance to pick up the themes associated with the goddess Diana again and explore les contre-séjours, which are the country states in which the beloved holds the poet lover captive. He's constantly torn between all these states that he finds himself in. If anyone wants to look it up, there is a translation which I just checked the other day, which has been out for a while, a translation of the daily. Under Bev's guidance, we read the work of the great essayist and philosopher, lawyer and mayor of Bordeaux, the nobleman Michel Étienne de Montaigne, a very clever chap, a very clever diplomat, managing to stay friends with opposing factions, with Henri III de Navarre, Henry III of Navarre, the Protestant who lived down the road, and with the most powerful Catholic family in France, the de Guise. Later, Henri III de Navarre, Henry III of Navarre, became Henri IV de France, Henry IV of France, by abjuring his Protestant faith. There were 3 generations of Protestants, even though François I, Francis I, was a Catholic. His sister was a Protestant. Very interesting. He said, Paris vaut une messe, Paris is worth a mass. But he didn't last long, he got killed. We looked at the periods which characterised Montaigne's writing, starting with his early Stoic period and ending with his Epicurean period, when in spite of the gravelle, the kidney stones, from which he suffered, he praised joyous living and enjoyment of the body, saying, quand je danse, I haven't got it on there. Quand je danse, when I dance, I dance. Quand je dors. And when I sleep, I really sleep. One of the important themes was the friendship with Etienne de la Boétie, whom Montaigne met early on. He didn't last long. It was a relationship which informed all of his life and some of his essays on friendship. I still remember the exam question Bev set that year. I think I'm going to show it to you now. Let me see. Yes. Which was, I think I've got the wrong one, sorry. There we are. Anyway, what she said was, c'est toujours à l'homme. I'm sure I've got it somewhere here. Let's see. No, it's not there. Go back. C'est toujours à l'homme dont nous avons affaire. I know it off by heart, really. Dont la condition est merveilleusement corporelle, which is, it's always mankind, but we can say humankind, with which we are concerned, whose condition is marvellously bodily. Right, 21, I don't know if I'm up to that yet. Much later, and I think we've got it here, in 2010, Sarah Bakewell, quite a famous woman who came to live in Australia for a while too, published her wonderful work, which I recommend to you all, and her illuminating biography of Montaigne, the first in English for 50 years, How to Live a Life of Montaigne in One Question and 20 Attempts at an Answer. It's absolutely wonderful. You can see my copy is very battered. I lent it to many people and probably threw a cup of tea on it as well. So I had to buy several copies so I could lend it to people. One friend to whom I lent a copy pointed out something that's brilliant for all of us who are moving on in age. His principle, Montaigne's principle of not looking directly at reality, but recalling pleasurable images of childhood and youth to divert himself from loss, accords well with the latest brain research in the United States. John Medina, the founder of 2 brain research institutes in the USA, says selective, focused trips down memory lane have a raft of mind-boggling benefits for those of us who are aging. Montaigne was right on to the money. In Bakewell's book, as the blurb tells us, we find out how to get on with people, how to deal with violence, which was a lot around in Montaigne's time, how to adjust to losing someone we love, how to live. A question which obsessed Montaigne, whose exploration of his own thoughts and experience were unlike anything ever written before. The Romans were good on letters, but nobody had ever done this, just recording things daily. It was fascinating. The great French 19th century novelist Gustave Flaubert, who wrote, some of you will remember Madame Bovary or seen the film, one of the finest novels, I think, ever written, urged his friends to read Montaigne, telling them that doing so would calm them down, adding, read him in order to live. In the final paragraph, I might get it right now, in the final paragraph, the final essay, Montaigne states, c'est une absolue perfection et comme divine de savoir jouir, you see the old-fashioned spelling, de savoir jouir loyalement de son être. It's an absolute perfection and as if divine, to know exactly how to loyally enjoy one's being. His essays tell us how to do that exactly, how to be ourselves and enjoy it. I urge you to read it. Okay. One of the spin-offs from working on Renaissance material was discovering this marvellous book called by Toineau Abo. It's an anagram on his name, Orchesography. Some of you might know the Warlock working on that. He's changed it, Belle qui tient ma fille, and so on. It's a manual on social dance of the era, published in 1589 under a pseudonym. He was born in Dijon, became a cleric and a canon. A canon in Langres, where he died. It translates beautifully. It's gorgeous. This is what it is: method and theory in the form of narrative and graphic description to learn how to dance, beat the drum, using every sort of diverse percussive instrument, to play the fife and the flute, to draw arms, and wear yourself out with other honest exercise, highly suitable for youth, in order to be welcome in all merry company, and to reveal in this company the dexterity and agility of the body. What happened is that Charles and I did follow that. We did a pavane and a galliard to some of you might know the Belle qui tient ma vie, which I used to sing in France. It's lovely, a lovely pavane. But we didn't take up arms, you'll be pleased to know. Right. Okay. When thinking about what the subject of my PhD was going to be, out of the blue, I was handed a novel which a friend thought I might like. I did. I was immediately hooked. The novel, L'œuvre noire, set in the 16th century, so it was returned to the Renaissance, so with a connection to my first area of research, published in France in the tumultuous year of, none of the youngies know this now, if I mention it, they say, what? 1968, les événements de Mai, the May riots, people chucking great slabs, and it went on for un incredible. Anyway, she published it in that year, and it went on to win the Prix Féminin for that year, the only work since the establishment of the prize in 1904 to have been unanimously awarded the prize. The Prix Féminin's panel is made up of women, but men have a right to. A lot of blokes have got prizes from it too, but that's why it's called the Prix Féminin. The prize is awarded to men, as I said. David Malouf's novel, The Great World, won the Prix Féminin étranger, the foreign bit of it, in 1991. L'œuvre noire is translated into English as the abyss, and I keep saying the abyss, and I don't mean the abyss, I mean the abyss. It's a title chosen by Margaret Yourcenar to echo the central chapter of the novel, which is l'abîme, the abyss, when things really gel in the novel. It's amazing. The L'œuvre noire is a reference that work in black, or the negredo, the first stage of the whole alchemical process, when everything breaks down to reform. She's got the Latin in there too, solve et coagula, to dissolves and then builds up again. And time and eternity become one. As the protagonist, Zenon, undertakes the first stage of the spiritual journey, the alchemy of the soul. It's a magnificent work. The author, I'll show you her, Margaret Yourcenar, unknown to me at the time, subsequently became very well known to me as I acquainted myself with all her work and the library, look at it, of some 7,000 volumes in her charming house, which I'll show you, Petite Plaisance, which is on Mount Desert Island, or what the Americans say, Mount Desert Island off the coast of Maine in the United States. Margaret Yourcenar lived at Petite Plaisance for almost 50 years until her death on the 17th of December 1987, in residence with her companion and English translator into English, an American Grace Frick, until Frick's death on November the 18th, 1979. While the L'œuvre noire, the abyss, deals with a fictitious character, who's an amalgam, a clever amalgam of about 30 Renaissance figures, brilliant, living out his life in the Low Countries in a very troubled era. A previous work has as its protagonist a real person, the Emperor Hadrian, who reigned from 117 to 138 of the Common Era. Yourcenar spent some 35 years on and off on this portrait of the emperor, with, as she said, one foot in scholarship, the other in magic, which echoes the thoughts of Anna Hebich, whose works are factually informed but imaginatively conceived, as Keira Lindsay told us on the 6th of June. Published in 1951, Yourcenar's creation of Hadrian's life, Mémoires d'Adrien, was an instant and overwhelming success, much to her great surprise. She thought she might get 3 readers. It's never been out of print. All her works are translated into over 55 languages. But she thought, she'd written it for herself and no one would be interested. It was published in English in 1979. This is a lovely edition, actually, with beautiful visual stuff in it too. Flaubert also played a role in the creation of the memoirs. In his correspondence, a sentence struck Marguerite Yourcenar: just when the gods had ceased to be and the Christ had not yet come, there was a unique moment in history between Cicero and Marcus Aurelius, to whom the work is addressed. It's a letter that she wrote. Yourcenar says a great part of her life was going to be spent in portraying that man who stood alone, namely Hadrian. These works and others of Yourcenar's were instrumental in her election, as we will see, to the French Academy, which in 1980, she was called the first immortelle. All the people who belong to the Academy are meant to be immortal. They're going to be remembered forever. And so the blokes are called immortelles, I-M-M-O-R-T-E-L, the masculine, or with an S on, plural, but she was the first immortelle to ever be elected since the founding of that illustrious institution in 1635. So she entered it 346 years later. It was the chaps that wanted her to. They all elected her. For her induction into the Academy, rather than wear what the chaps wear, a 3-cornered hat, a sword, a green blazer with a canthus on it, reminding us of the academies in Greece, ancient Greece, she decided she wasn't going to have a sword and a hat and so on. She asked Yves Saint Laurent, good choice, to design her some elegant attire. It made her look, as people said, rather like an abbess or a mother superior, but it was very suitable for a dignified older woman and the first amongst all men. I've selected a few images from the memoirs of Hadrian, which happen to be very pertinent at the moment with the war in Ukraine, unfortunately. This is Snake Island in the Black Sea, and here's the Black Sea. The description of the island by the emperor's right-hand man, Arrian, I'll show you him, a Cappadocian Greek who carried out a circumnavigation of the Black Sea in 130 to 131. He wrote a report in Greek in the form of a letter to the emperor. We have it. We've got them. It's amazing. You know how we've lost so much from Attic? We've got this. Yourcenar pointed out that if everything else was missing, if no other documents were around, we have a very clear picture from this, from Arrian's work. It would suffice, she said, to give to create in broad outline the great imperial figure of Hadrian. As she said, everything is there. His friendship with Arrian, and in an era when a scholarly administrator, very learned man, Arrian, can still address his prince as a friend. Hadrian's love of travel to unknown lands and barbarous climes. He spent a third of his principate on the move. The sensitivity of Arrian to Hadrian's love of desert wastes inhabited by seabirds. He describes in the temple to Achilles on Snake Island. The presence of the birds in his letter, it's just beautiful. Arian's letter, is echoed in the beautiful vase which was in Hadrian's villa in Rome. On a field of marble snow, a flock of wild heron are spreading their wings to fly away in utter solitude. And it's all, Arian would have seen that vase, I'm sure. Birds are present in a lot of the work of Yourcenar, an inveterate bird watcher. The book, which I will show you, La Voix des Choses, with photography by her friend Jerry Wilson, published posthumously. This next, I'll show you, contains beautiful bird pictures. It's built around a collection of sayings from Buddhism and Christianity, which sustained Margaret Yourcenar throughout her entire life. In La Voix des Choses, Yourcenar includes, and I might have gone past it, no, it's beautiful here, a Buddhist manifesto expressing sentiments which she too espouses, and all of us who are determined to preserve creatures love it. What she said was, si innombrable que soit les créatures, what the Buddhist saying says, errantes dans l'étendue des trois mondes, je travaillerai à les sauver. However numerous the creatures wandering in the reaches of the three worlds, earth, sky, ocean, I'll work to save them. Okay. The last fictional work she wrote has as its protagonist a man who dies on an island off the north of Holland. And so those pictures are taken from the north of Holland. The dedicatee of the work is Jerry Wilson, the chap that did all the photography with her. Margaret Yourcenar was a very complex and very talented woman who not only wrote a large corpus of work, but also supported a huge number of charitable organisations devoted to animal and human welfare and to the environment. She was a great explorer of wilderness and had the work of the American transcendentalists such as Thoreau, saying the French way, in her library. Her correspondence on all these matters, along with the manuscripts of her writing, is held in the they pronounce it Houghton, I think the Americans say, I always thought it was Houghton, in Harvard University. Her writings were all published in her lifetime in volumes of the most prestigious publications ever, the famous Playard editions. You have to be dead normally to be in them, but she, during her lifetime, they published it, and you will see, I'll show you. Volume 1 is all her fiction, and then volume 2 is her memoirs and so on, and essays. The house can be visited, and you can visit it virtually, and which is lovely. I've put it here if anyone wants to do that. It's really absolutely lovely to do, run by some terrific people who live over on the mainland, and it's terrific. Okay, we're coming to Baudin. I know that the letterhead of the Friends of the State Library has some of the artwork of the Baudin expedition, which is lovely. The two corvettes of the expedition to les Terres Australes, Southlands, led by Post-Captain Nicolas Baudin, until his death on the Ile-de-France, Mauritius, in September 1803. I haven't sent it to you, have I yet? We've got it up, yeah. The Geographe commanded by Baudin and the Naturalist. The expedition set sail from Le Havre, France, on the 19th of October 1800 with 256 people on board, including 22 naturalists and some artists. A voyage with scientific aims echoed in the names of the corvettes, the boats, which gave their names to geographical features in Western Australia. Some of you would know Geographe Bay and Cape Naturalist, those two capes. Cape Lewin and Cape Naturalist, fitting names for the new faith in the age of the Enlightenment, what the French called le siècle des Lumières, the century of light. On that score, the expedition was a great success. 2,542 new zoological species were discovered and named, 10 times the number of Cook's second voyage. The health of everybody on board, the 256 people, was of paramount importance. The late Donald Simpson, a neurosurgeon some of you would have known, and a passionate devotee of history, the history of medicine too, we decided to jointly and individually do presentations and publications devoted to the medical side of the expedition. I'll see what we're doing here. Okay. We first of all did a combination publication which we delivered to, and that in the Australian Journal of French Studies. I subsequently turned my attention to some of the artwork of the expedition. Sorry, I've jumped that. Sorry, I do not mean that there. Yeah. Where have I got to? Yeah, so Donald and I both lectured to different people. He lectured to medical colleagues. I lectured to ANU medical students. So there are a big cohort of them, over 100, all with previous degrees, and they were madly enthusiastic. And one of them said, "What you lectured on beats anatomy any day." And I said, "Yes, perhaps, but you have to do anatomy. This is just fun, background." Donald and I were very lucky enough to be part of what some of you might have noticed I call the community or commonwealth of scholars around the world. We are assisted by superbly trained archivists in research institutions in Paris and by French Navy personnel, all of whom gave unstinting help. We carried out research looking at the ranks, medical training, early and subsequent experience of the 5-man official medical team. We obtained our information from the naval records held, it's really fun to do this, go out to the Chateau de Vincennes, from the journals of the expedition commanders and officers, and from the post-expedition writers of the medical team held in the medicine library, the University one in Paris, which contained the thesis each man had written subsequent to the voyage. Compulsory, they had to do it. We analysed the instructions on health drawn up by the head of the Naval Health Service. Yes, so Donald brought up papers, and I think 49 is the next one. Okay, no, there they are. No, I don't want that. Where do I want? I published in France this very, very weighty tome. It was fun. And so there we were. Okay. Yeah, this if it's in the right order. No, it's not. Oh, that's what it is. Yes, it's one of these, prestigious French, well, I thought it was quite prestigious, huge volume about this thing, looking at all this exploration and so on. The name of the committee is, I love it, Comité des Travaux Historiques et Scientifiques. So it's a committee for historic and scientific works in Paris. Okay, I subsequently turned my attention to, where is it? That was the one in that. I subsequently turned my attention to something I've been thinking about for a long time, which was with a theory I wanted to explore based on dance. A presentation at the University of Adelaide with feedback from a terrifically enlightened, helpful, enlivening audience was great. And then our chapter in Framing French Culture, where is it? No, where's Framing? There, Framing French Culture. That is up there, yeah, okay. And my chapter was called The Artwork of the Baudin Expedition. So it wasn't. It was called Nicolas Martin Petit's 1802 portrait of an Aboriginal woman and child from Van Diemen's Land. It's this 1802 portrait of Bruny Islander. What a woman she was, Aramaida, which first attracted my attention. When she met the 3 Frenchmen, she painted them black with charcoal and thought they looked very comely, very attractive. She sang to them. One of them sang her the Marseillaise. She danced for them, they danced for her. And it was the most extraordinarily interesting meeting. She was really a leader amongst the other women with her were quite frightened, but she was very, very game. So this portrait of Aramaida by the young artist Nicolas Martin Petit attracted my attention. What number are we on? Yeah. He'd been trained at the Louvre by one of the preeminent artists of the era, the portraitist of Napoleon, no less, Jacques-Louis David. He depicts Aramaida with her child in a dance position, reflecting the artist's training at the Louvre. The edition of the personal journal of Nicolas Baudin, edited by Jacqueline Bonmain, who became a great friend of all of us, she's a wonderful woman, has Aramaida on its cover. The two hemispheres seem to me, north and south, they seem to enrich each other. We've got an Australian, a southern dimension. We've also got the training of the chap that portrayed her. Though I've used the French copies of the accounts by commanders and scientists and officers, I'm delighted to own a copy of Christine Cornell's 1974 translation into English of Baudin's journal, reproduced by the Friends of the State Library of South Australia in 2004. This I inherited from the library of Alan and Elizabeth Brissenden, whom a lot of you here will know and recall very fondly. On the 6th of June, I had a visit from a friend and colleague, another member of the Commonwealth of Scholars around the world, Paul Gibbard, now at UWA. He brought me his beautifully researched and written book with a dedication to me in the front, go back, talking about being a Baudin lover, a Baudin feel, he said. The book, The French Collector, is, we've got it up there? No, we have the next one. The French Collector is, it's about Theodore Leschenault, who was one of the botanists on board Baudin's ships. Leschenault's name is given to any of you who know WA, the southwest. We know this beautiful. There are about 8 different colours, but I love the blue best of all, biloba, which when you're driving south down to Denmark and the tall carry country, it just, the side of the road, it's so bright. Neighbours had this growing in their garden and they didn't know what it was, but it's really fascinating. Yeah, so part of the French Collector is Paul's translation of Leschenault's journal, which had been lost for 200 years and turned up in an auction house in the west of France in 2016. The auctioneers were rubbing their hands with glee, thinking they were going to get a lot of money out of this, and it went up to a colossal number of euros. The French government said, "Stop, it belongs to us," because that was the deal at the time. All those young chaps who went away, and older chaps, they had to, their journals, they all had to compulsory write a journal, and it belonged to the French government. So whoever it was that was bidding, and they, it was huge, a big sum, so it's very exciting. Paul's book is a delight to read, the incredible sweetness and charm of Leschenault. He's so thoughtful towards his family, his friends, his acquaintances, and his reflections on life seem to me to show a wisdom beyond his 26 years at the time. They're all superbly rendered in Paul's translation. This sentence in one of his, that he copied into his journal, he says, "I hope to gain some credit from the expedition and prepare the ground for all the satisfactions of heart and mind in later life, those supreme delights that are independent of the events that occur in life." I think it's very, very beautiful, and it's very far-thinking for a young person in their 20s to think at that time. Right. Okay, one of the most exciting projects of publication and research I've ever been involved with was for the retirement journal of this gorgeous man, Professor Chris Gossip, who's an emeritus professor of French, comes from Scotland, so you can imagine gorgeous Edinburgh accent. Doesn't matter what he says, you just want to hear it. It's just beautiful. He's also very smart. He's lovely. The title of the volume was chosen to honour Chris's main area of research. He's a specialist on the 17th century. And so we looked at, I thought it would be a good idea to look at the antecedents, the Greek tragedy that then feeds into French 17th century, and why not look at 21st spin-offs in film and so on. So you've got the influences and then you've got the transformations. An impressive Commonwealth of scholars from 3 continents around the world were chosen to peer review each essay. And Bernard, my co-editor, agreed we'd put the people in because they're terrifically eminent, or to contribute essays, among them Chris's doctoral supervisor, Harry Barnwell, by then very old, but he did it, he did an essay. As one of our contributors from the UK said, he said, Chris Gossip deserves our huge gratitude for all he's done for the discipline, for the subject. Funding from the University of New England and the French Embassy in Canberra was forthcoming, and that facilitated many aspects of the project, like the launch and all sorts of things. We had a dinner for Chris to launch it, and he was completely overcome. It was just lovely. He didn't know anything about it, kept it absolutely quiet. My colleague Bernard Bourg, with whom I'd worked very happily on many projects before, agreed to co-edit with me. We formed a very harmonious team, a dream team really, working solidly and enjoying it immensely. We also both wrote essays, ours in French, the only 2 in French, for the collection. Okay. Right. I'm just going to touch on translation of Australian authors into French because it's such a fabulously interesting topic. A book beloved by our family, many lines of which we all know off by heart, Randall Stowe's Midnight. The story of a not very bright 17-year-old wild colonial boy who luckily has a very clever cat, spelt K-H-A-T, who's Siamese, and when he goes back to Siam, all his rellies telling him that he's got an Australian accent. It's very funny. Kat suggests that Midnight should become a bushranger. So the rest of the bushranging gang includes Red Ned, a very tall and handsome horse, a Major Mitchell cockatoo, very amusing, Dora, his cow, who's a bit dopey but fun, and Jip, his dog, who could never decide, who was always laughing and frowning at the same time because he never knew whether he was doing the right thing. Other characters in the story are Trooper O'Grady, who keeps putting Midnight into prison, the great grey jail by the sea, Frio jail, and Mrs. Chiffle, whose lifelong ambition has always been to have a bushranger under her bed, and she manages to do it with Midnight. The irascible Judge Pepper, he's always cross, and most importantly, Queen Victoria, who is frequently sending irritable telegrams signed Victoria R to the administrators of the colony to complain about Midnight's behaviour, until he discovers gold, changes his name to Mr. Daybreak, and visits her in England. She's very charmed. Memorable lines of hers such as, "Richness must be encouraged," and on Mrs. Chiffle, "Preposterous woman," rang out in our family. We were always saying, Queen Victoria knows everyone in the colony, of course, and decides if they don't do something about Midnight, she'll come out and rule the colonies herself, she says. Randall was his favourite, Randall Stowe's favourite amongst all his books. Another reason for mentioning Midnight is the positive and unexpected spin-off it has had recently. When attending a workshop on UWA in December 2018 on translating Australian literature into French, with a distinguished French translator of David Malouf and Tim Winton, no less, Nadine Gassy, I told her of the works of Randall Stowe, of whom she'd never heard, a West Australian who attended the University of Western Australia before settling in England, where he wrote opera libretto, all kinds of things, very clever man. I encouraged her to buy Midnight before she returned to France, which she did. She fell in love with this captivating and very funny book. He's achingly funny. Familiarised herself with all Randolph Stowe's work, maintaining he is the missing link to Patrick White. She thinks he's worth, and she's not far wrong. She signed a contract with the publishers, and I'll show you, Au Vent des Îles, to translate all Stowe's work into French, so it was a really happy outcome. The first volume, The Visitants, is coming out on the 22nd of August, so very soon. Quotes on the power of Randolph Stowe's work and his sensitivity to place from Tim Winton, and from our next speaker in this series, Nicholas Jose, are included in the translation. And there's also a nice coverage of Randolph Stowe. Right. I'm just going to do a sum up of some of the roles. I've had to ditch various things, of course. I was hoping to talk about David Attenborough, who is, as we all decided on the 4th of July, second only to our very own guru, Chris Daniels, but I've had to drop that space. But I'm just going to do a quick look at some of the roles books, writing and reading have in our lives. This is beautiful. I love this. I've gone back, sorry. A History of Reading. It's gorgeous. It's a lovely book on reading. She's also a translator of Margaret Yulson. He's a bloke. Mungle is also, he's a Latin American who's got, only a dozen languages up his sleeve, and he translates Margaret Yulson out too. Books suggest a new path we can take, like the Arbo, going to dance, or an intellectual one. Eluard's poems, a book of poems and poems, and his particularly Liberté, were dropped from planes into France to encourage people's morale during the occupation in the Second World War. And they did, they raised morale. They can encourage us to take risks, as in, this motto is on the fridge. What it was in 1969 July, at the moment of the landing on the moon, what the French call it, le lunissage, they've got a new word, so moon landing. I was tempted to direct, and I'd never done it, done a lot of board strutting, but no directing a play, one of Samuel Beckett's plays, Endgame, and I was absolutely terrified. I thought, I can't do it. But this book just fell open, and it said, to try and fail is at least to learn, but to fail to try is to suffer the inestimable loss of what might have been. And I put it into French to encourage myself now. I couldn't have done it then. Essayer et échouer, c'est tout au moins apprendre. Mais ne pas même essayer, c'est souffrir la perte inestimable de ce qui aurait pu être. And then we've got these wonderful people who have taken risks, like Olga Struhanis, and not survived, trying to save Lake Pedder. I was thinking and sent a message to the two chaps, Dr. Richard Harris and Dr. Craig Challen, who saved the boys on the 10th of July 2018. I mean, what an amazing thing. We feel so proud of them. This is Éloge du Risque, is by a very clever, wonderful, attractive French woman who died living up the precepts of risk-taking. She swam out to save two little boys. They survived. This is off a very wild bit of French coast in the summer, but was dangerous. She had a heart attack and died in her 50s, but she lived what she believed, and she's written a lot on risk and talks a lot about it. In the case of Behrouz Bouhani, whom a lot of you will know, he wrote his book, as we know, under very difficult circumstances while he was being incarcerated. It won him a prize and facilitated his release. It also drew attention to Manus and Nauru and the ignominious plight of the inmates. Books enable us to share our lives with friends and family when we're together around the campfire, or having a cuppa over a meal, and we discuss books. One of the people I love, who's not with us any longer, was the late Geoffrey Shellam, who was Professor of Microbiology at UWA, the chair of University of WA Press, now University Publishing, for a mere 18 years. The recipient posthumously of the very first Philippa Madden Award for service to the humanities. He also, Jeff, practiced a barking owl. Now, some of you might not know the barking owl. It's in the Pilbara and the Kimberley, and also in New Guinea. Now, it barks. You can look it up on, one of those bird things. It's wonderful. It sounds exactly like a dog. So for 3 weeks, before launching this children's book called The Barking Owl, Jeff practiced. His wife, Fiona, whose birthday is today, she and I were laughing about this yesterday. He practiced doing a barking owl, and he got it off pretty well. But when they went out to launch the book in Wembley, they got there and there was a stand with a real barking owl on it. And so Jeff started to speak, and the barking owl barked the whole time. It's absolutely wonderful. Yeah. Okay. Jeff, dear Jeff. He also introduced me to this book, Montaillou. Some of you might know. He didn't read French, but it's an amazing book. On 1294 to 1324, looking at the community down the south of France. I mean, it's a wonderful book, really superb. Okay. So books allow us to share the feelings of others and realise we're not alone. When they're well written, by what I call, my term, syntactical engineers, like Jane Austen or George Eliot or the Brontes. You've got a long span and it doesn't sag like a cake in the middle. That we can't do it like they could, I think. They train us in ethics as somebody, and teach us compassion, as one of the recent speakers on Radio National talking about books said. But books and writing can be very dangerous too, as we know, and we won't mention all those that are under threat through the books. Daniel Defoe, as I said, was put in the stocks on the 31st of July, but luckily people pelted flowers at him, so he was okay. We celebrate when friends publish, illuminating books on local issues. Our great friend, a lot of people in this room, Gillian Dawley, who's written far too many books on about 6 subjects. She's wonderful. Jane Austen and music, Nepal. What else has she written on? Iris Murdoch. She's just fabulous. But this one is on her. She's very knowledgeable about Matthew Flinders, who met up with Nicolas Baudin on the 8th of April 1802 off the coast of South Australia. This chap too, another delightful local, John Field, some of you may know, whose book Rosie's People gives very welcome background on German settlement in South Australia. They're wonderful books. I hope to have shown you some, what books have enabled for me and maybe for all of you here. And as my friend Joan Wardrop says, she says to have outlined the infinite compartments of the scholarly life. Well, it's not only the scholarly life in general, the constant fascination and intellectual intrigue and the relationship with so many people through reading and recommending and sharing books. My fervent wish on behalf of all bibliophiles, wherever they might be, is that books continue to bring us all great joy. Thank you for your attention.